Well, first of all, a sea change, for those who don't know, is an idiom used to describe a major transformation, a total change. And I think not an occasional cyclical fluctuation, a major change. And I think we may be going through one of those. As you mentioned, the first one that I lived through occurred in the years between 1980 and 2020. In 1980, for those who don't remember, interest rates in the States reached over 20%. Paul Volcker became chairman of the Fed. He had to raise rates in order to snuff out inflation and inflationary thinking. Inflation is a real menace, and it has to be brought under control. And you do that by slowing the economy. So Volcker did that. As I say, I had a loan outstanding from a bank at the time. The rate on the loan hit 22 and a quarter in 1980. 40 years later, I was able to borrow at 2 and a quarter. So in other words, interest rates came down by 20%, or what we call 2,000 basis points. And this has been a very strong tailwind supporting asset ownership, subsidizing borrowers, enriching owners of assets, penalizing savers and lenders. And this prevailed for a very long time. So this was a tremendous tailwind that benefited certain strategies and penalized others. And it had other effects, of course. It produces risk taking, because very safe instruments like treasuries and cash yield close to zero. Nobody wants zero, so they have to go out the risk curve in order to get the kinds of returns they do want, and they have to take risk to get that. There were many ramifications. People were eager to do lending to risky companies, which meant made it very easy for risky companies to grow. That's another effect. So I think that I'm not calling for a return to 20% interest rates. Right now the Fed funds rate in the States is about 4 and a quarter, and I think it'll stay in this vicinity. It'll go a little higher next year. They've indicated that there will be some more rate rises, but nothing major. My main point is that it's not going back to what it used to be. To fight the global financial crisis, the Fed dropped the Fed funds rate to zero at the end of 2008 and kept it there for 7 years. So people start to think, oh, I guess zero is the normal interest rate. Well, the point is it's not. And when you have a very strong economy abetted by low interest rates, then you don't have defaults and bankruptcies. That's not normal. It's not normally so easy to raise money if you're a low quality company. That's not normal. So my point is that we're going back, in my opinion, to a normal times in which it's not so great for borrowers and asset owners, and it's not so bad for savers and lenders.
Wow. Also, just a follow-up here, Howard, do you think investors in general even currently underappreciate the combined effects of this sea change coupled with the withdrawal of liquidity that central banks are underway currently?
That's a great question, Iraj, and I think the answer is no. First of all, as I said, we've had the basic conditions I described, this ease of getting money, of running companies, of growing, et cetera, freedom from defaults and bankruptcies, et cetera. We've had that since the end of the global financial crisis, 08, 09. A lot of people, memories are short in the financial world, and a lot of people can't remember anything beyond earlier than, let's say, 08. And of course, interest rates have been declining for the last 40 years, or actually 42, because the peak was 1980, 42 years ago, 43. Very few people remember the financial conditions before 1980. So yes, I think that many people feel that the conditions of the last 13 years in particular are normal, and that we're going to go back to normal. And I don't really believe in the ability to foretell the future, including my own ability to foretell the future. But it's just my feeling that, as I said, the Fed kept interest rates at 0 for 7 years. I don't think they're happy to do that. I don't think they're happy to go back there. There were a lot of reasons why 0 rates are not a good idea. It does encourage inflation. It does make it too easy for borrowers and too bad for savers. And one of the ways the Fed solves problems when they arise in the economy is by reducing interest rates. Well, if your interest rate is 0, you can't reduce interest rates. And 0 interest rates tend to keep companies alive that shouldn't stay alive. One of the beauties of capitalism is that it's Darwinian. It's survival of the fittest. But in a 0 rate environment, the unfit can stay alive. That's not a good thing. I once said in one of my memos that fear of bankruptcy is to capitalism as fear of hell is to Catholicism. And people should have to make difficult capital allocation decisions and not get money for nothing. Anyway, that's a long, and there's in the memo that you see change, there's a long list of the salutary effects of low interest rates, and a list of the reasons why we shouldn't go back to 0. And the last thing I'll say is that most people in the financial community are optimistic by nature.
That's true.
And Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, always quotes the philosopher Demosthenes, who said, "For that which a man wishes, that he will believe." So there's a lot of wishful thinking, so yes, I think that people are holding to optimism and belief that we're going back to the ways of the teens, when I think we're not. And by the way, so what I say in the memo, I don't say rates are going to 20, as I said, or to 10, or to 8, or to 6. I say they're going to stay between 2 and 4, not 0 and 2. That's the whole difference. And we'll see. I mean, if they go back to 0, then I'm wrong. But of course, if they go back to 0, I'll make a lot of money because financial assets become very valuable.
My question is this: that if indeed inflationary pressures have ebbed a little bit, and with these layoffs that we're seeing, if indeed the stubbornly high wage inflation also shows sign of cooling, could there be a pivot, part one, a small one at that? And could risk assets like US equities, for example, start looking attractive at a particular valuation simply because they've had a very tumultuous 2022 any which ways?
Sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I say in the memo that inflation is caused by too much money chasing too few goods. That's the classic definition. And thanks to the pandemic, we have too much money because the government gave out a lot of money to ease people's suffering, and they couldn't spend it, so they put it in the bank. So there's too much money in people's savings accounts, and too few goods because the supply chain has started up a little haltingly. And those influences will abate over time. The extra money will get spent. The supply chain will catch up. So yes, so inflation will abate. Whether it goes right all the way back to less than 2 again, we'll see. But if it does abate, then I think by definition we'll have fewer interest rate increases than we otherwise would have had. Right now, in his last pronouncement, Chairman Powell said we're going to have more increases, but smaller than people had thought over a longer period of time than people had thought. It gave the impression that rates will be going up throughout 2023. But if you're right, if inflation abates, then they can pivot and become less hawkish. High interest rates we call hawkish as opposed to dovish sooner. It could happen. Who knows? Now, you remind me of your second question.
So my question therefore was, does that make at some valuation US equity markets
Yeah.
attractive as well, because they've had a bad 2022 anyways.
Yes. Well, declining interest rates have a tendency to increase the value of assets. The value of an asset is the discounted present value of the future cash flows.
Yeah.
And if you discount the future cash flows at a lower interest rate, then they're worth more. So there's a direct influence. And, all investors and all markets get very happy when they see interest rates coming down. And it could happen. And as you say, the U.S. stock market, if interest rates start coming down, the U.S. stock market, there's some point, some valuation at which it's extremely attractive. I don't think it's quite there yet, because the valuations are, we value stocks basically on what's called the price earnings ratio. And the price earnings ratio right now is higher than it historically has been on average. So they're not cheap. And the other thing is that most people think we're going to have a recession thanks to the Fed's actions. And that recession will cause earnings to decline, which by itself causes the price earnings ratio to increase, making them uncheap. So, a lot of things have to happen well for stocks to perform extremely well.